There's an old quote that sums up a theme we've seen throughout the Amazing Digital Circus. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. Pomni's life may be digital and restricted to a strange and surreal hellscape, but we've seen her grow and find meaning in some of her new friendships after a rough adjustment to the circus. In the last episode, she treats the latest surreal adventure as just another day. Stories about digital reality are a great way to hold up a cracked mirror against our struggles to find meaning in the real world, often using some pretty surreal imagery. One of my favorite examples is from Greg Egan's novel Permutation City. I know who I am. I am not human. He plunged his fist into his chest, effortlessly penetrating shirt, skin, and ribs, and tore his heart out. He felt the parting of his flesh and the aftermath, but although aspects of the pain were realistic, pre-programmed barriers kept it isolated within his brain, a perception without any emotional or even metabolic consequences. That was the dramatics of the character Pierre, once a real human being who was killed in an accident. As a digital being living in a digital world, Pierre has discarded human frailties that are attached to a physical body, like normal pain responses and even normal emotional responses. Pierre, a keen member of the transhumanist organization called Solipsist Nation, enjoys editing his own emotions, even his own memories and psychology, in a constant effort to make sure he isn't weighed down by negativity, to ensure that each moment he lives in his digital world is interesting. In a way, Pierre is the opposite of Pomni. He sees his digital life as granting him freedom to recreate himself as he sees fit, in complete defiance of the expectations and norms of others. Pomni, meanwhile, is focused more and more on authentic connections with the people around her. In episode 4, we saw her try to comfort Gengal after Gengal lost her cool outside Spudsies, and for a moment they had a vulnerable conversation where Gengal admitted she wouldn't confide in Ragatha because, as Gengal put it, after a while it gets kinda hard to tell how genuine she's actually being. And I think this is a large part of the fun of this show. It can get to the heart of relatable issues like awkward friendships or emotional vulnerability by leaning into its surreal imagery, as we saw when Gengal's switching between two masks became key to her emotional journey in episode 4, which I discussed in my video analyzing that episode. On my video Abstraction Explained, one comment argued that this theory is interesting, but I really hate the idea of it's just AI copies, they're not real. To me, this kind of feels like it defeats the point of the show. In my opinion, at its most basic level, it is about people dealing with this terrifying reality. If the people aren't people, this idea just kind of breaks down. Thanks for the comment. It kind of inspired this video about what a digital setting means in terms of the meaning we can get from the story. I'm going to push back on the idea that if a character like Pomni is an AI copy, the meaning of the show breaks down. Pomni has the full suite of human emotions: fear, disgust, relief, gratitude, anger, the whole spectrum. Unfortunately, she's trapped in a new world where, to her, nothing makes sense. None of us can walk about in a kingdom full of candy people and get our bodies literally stretched like elastic between two racing trucks. But we can relate to Pomni's struggles anyway, to the extent that she has relatable emotional reactions and sympathetic or understandable motivations. Thus far, her main motivation is to escape. If she is a digital copy, this may be impossible. Of course, in the real world, there is a limit to what we can escape as well. If we don't like life on Earth in the 21st century, that's tough luck, because life on Mars is currently still out of reach no matter what Elon Musk might say. To a degree, we're all stuck. Of course, if we're happy with our lives, then it doesn't matter. But Pomni isn't, and probably most people have felt broadly the way she does at one point or another. In Permutation City, the digital character Pierre eventually finds out that his life in his digital city cannot continue. And despite his efforts to edit his emotions and his psychology, he still struggles to decide what he should do next. I think a digital world with digital characters can be just as interesting as one with real characters, as long as the characters, whether it be Pierre, Pomni, or someone else, struggle with challenges that give us a warped reflection of the struggles we face in our own lives. And there's also an ominous link between the Amazing Digital Circus and the novel Permutation City that may give us a clue as to where the Amazing Digital Circus is heading. Towards the end of the novel, Pierre's digital city begins to unravel. It's all down to the elaborate way the city was designed. The architect of the virtual city was so focused on making it immersive and exciting long term that he hired a woman called Maria De Luca to create a secondary virtual environment called Planet Lambert that, as a patchwork addition, introduced flaws into the structure of the overall virtual reality. There's a scene near the end of the novel where Maria De Luca's digital copy watches the result in horror. The golden towers of Permutation City were flowing past the apartment window. She cried out in astonishment and put her hands up, trying to gesture to the others. The buildings weren't simply moving away, they were softening, melting, deforming. As an interesting parallel, Caine's obsession with creating ever more immersive and complex and compelling adventures can take up so much focus and attention that if he slips, the primary reality starts to lose form, as we saw in episode 3. And in episode 4, we saw Caine ignore his pre-planned adventure in favor of one from the suggestion box. It seems that since he had to make it last minute without preparation, he filled it with old characters from the other adventures to make it work, and maybe that was still too taxing for him, given that towards the end, after his evaluation of Gengal, he glitched. I think that the parallels show that the fate of the characters may be far more dire than any of them realize, given that we don't know exactly how stable or coherent or well-designed the Digital Circus program is. All we know is that the more we watch this weird show, the more flaws in the program seem to emerge. As the ringmaster of the circus, we've seen Caine himself struggle like Pomni with a need for things to make sense. In his case, his role as creator of the adventures gives him a sense of purpose that he seems to cling to, and that brings me back to the quote we started with. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. That's a saying of the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, which Viktor Frankl, a psychologist and Holocaust survivor, quoted in his book Man's Search for Meaning to support his belief that we each need to find a meaning that will enrich our lives. Or more bluntly, Frankl argues that each of us has a responsibility to actualize meaning in our lives. We've seen Pomni take steps in this direction by building meaningful, fulfilling friendships. Perhaps Caine needs to be more creative when it comes to his creativity. In other words, re-evaluate whether his purpose should be just making new adventures, whether that is the right why for his digital life. Whether Caine can fulfill his current purpose without the entire virtual world falling apart remains to be seen. If you enjoyed my thoughts about a possible digital apocalypse, subscribe for more overthinking and analysis of odd animations. Thank you to those of you who've subscribed already. Have a great week, embrace the weird, and thank you for watching.